Well, hot buttons can be like you always or you never,
Yeah.
or it could be mother-in-law, father-in-law, it could be, whatever it is in the context. If someone says you always, that's a gross exaggeration. But what it means, if Brenda says you always, it means she's really been wounded in this area and has not been healed. And so that means if she's saying you always, then I have some work I need to do. And say, honey, and then we need to work at this process. And then we need to consistently begin to try and heal her in this area or help her heal herself or vice versa. So hot buttons can be really, it could be you don't have a job, it could be our finances, it could be anything that where you guys would not resolve the issue, or if you haven't resolved the issue, you don't have a plan for resolving the issue. Most wives are willing to work if you have a plan to resolve the issue. And it doesn't mean we as a guy have to come up with a plan. It's something we can do together. So I tell sometimes couples go out for coffee or dinner and just take a notebook or laptop or iPad and make a plan how you want to do this. And then when you do it together, she loves working with you because part of our wives' identity comes from who we are as a man. Now, we're not wired that way, but our wives are. So all that's really important.
Yeah, people don't tell you that in the popular media, but that's true. They are wired that way, absolutely. I thank you for that truth. But you just said something that really impacted me, because if she uses the words always and never, you said it means that she's got an area where she's wounded and has never been healed. So I'm listening to that, and I'm hearing that, and I want our guys to hear what is being said here. If she's using words like always and never to you, it's speaking of her brokenness and possibly our failure as a husband. Can you explain?
Well, one, we could have wounded her, or her dad or some man in her life could have wounded her.
Oh, yeah.
And so when we start repeating the same act on the surface, like she's experienced someplace else, or maybe it's just us, then she's retreating. You mentioned earlier in the podcast about her emotionally retreating, which impacts her physical retreating. And so what we need to do, if my wife would ever come and say to me, Clarence, you always do this and that, I would say, honey, because my natural tendency is to make sure I can prove one time I didn't do it, so that way it's not always. But then I'm missing the boat. But then I have to go and say, okay, honey, why are you saying always? I'm not sure that I always, but why? What's behind that? What's going on here? Have I hurt you in this area? And just tell me. I can take it. Just tell me what happened, and then let her do that. And then when she finishes, then I'll begin to say, okay, honey, I'm so sorry that I did that. And then I said, if I'm guilty, then I say, hey, I don't ever want to do that again. But let's process. Hey, I'm giving you permission that when you see me begin to do that, you can just do that and remind me, or say, hey, honey, remember you said to remind you, this is an example of this and that. And so you begin to work at it. But she has a responsibility too to identify it. And then you have a responsibility to own it. And you're working together to heal her. That gives her hope. You're learning your wife better, and you're developing intimacy with each other, which is not so much sexual, but it's a closeness that helps her feel more secure with you. And then eventually she'll stop saying you always or never. And eventually she might say, hey, I used to say you did this all the time, but now I'm so proud of you. Thanks for blah, blah, blah. Because if we don't do that, that's going to lead her toward an affair, or you toward an affair down the road if it doesn't get corrected.
To hear the rest of the conversation, check out episode 435 of the Men in the Arena podcast called Keeping Your Wife Your Best Friend.